Who's ready for adventure? Well, let's go!
Boys and girls around the world, get ready for a time that you don't want to miss.
Fascinating, isn't it? And yet, imagine a time where such a simple and humble device as this, one that we take granted for every day, didn't exist. Now, we're not that far removed from that time as you might think. As a matter of fact, I might not even be able to turn on this device. Like so. If it wasn't for the help of one man. Join us on today's expedition as we explore the life of a Mr. Michael Faraday. Much better. And now that we're more comfortable, let's get into some history.
History.
Michael Faraday was born on September 22nd, 1791. And unfortunately for Michael Faraday, he was born into poverty in one of the most class-conscious societies in human history, Victorian England. Almost no one who was poor ever attained any wealth or notoriety. And with a father who was a poor blacksmith, it didn't look well for Michael Faraday.
To basically be focused on
In fact, Michael Faraday didn't even receive a formal education until beyond the age of 13.
What is happening?
Review. Park, what are you doing? We're starting our class now.
Instead, Michael Faraday got a job at a bookshop where he would begin first as a delivery boy and then be quickly promoted to a bookbinding apprentice. Now, while this may seem like a disadvantage to Michael Faraday, it actually proved to be the inciting moment that would launch him into a science career. For you see, during the day, he would bind the books, and at night, he'd read them. And this reading was what would introduce him into the world of science. For you see, reading both gives us the power to gain knowledge, and of course, as we all know, to bend the ability to travel through space and time. Like so. Faraday's readings sparked his passion into science and led him into one specific field where he would later devote his entire life to. Faraday devoted himself into the world of electricity, and soon an opportunity would arise that would bring him out of the slums and into the prestige of the scientific community. You see, Faraday idolized a prominent English scientist known as Humphrey Davy. Now, Davy was a terrific scientist and a top-tier showman. And Faraday managed to impress Davy by delivering to him a self-binded book that contained transcripts of some of Davy's lectures. Now, Davy suddenly injured himself shortly after receiving this book in a lab accident that would temporarily blind him. That's about the equivalent. Now, without his eyes, Davy hired Faraday as his own personal lab assistant. And now let's get into some science!
Hey, science!
The homopolar motor was Michael Faraday's first contribution to the scientific world. Now, before Faraday made this discovery, Humphrey Davy and another scientist named Hans Christian Ørsted were working on the concept of electromagnetic rotation and had already established that an electric current does interact with a magnetic field, and that this current can usually cause the magnet to either be repelled or attracted. What they hadn't figured out yet was to use this information and create a steady, constant rotation by either the magnet or the electric current. Faraday is the one that discovered this and created the motor. Now, what Faraday did was create one steady current of electricity with one difference. In part of the current, there would be a conducting liquid. In Faraday's case, it was mercury. In our case, it's salt water. Now, Faraday put a magnet inside the conductant and then took a copper wire and placed it in the conductant, hanging on another wire suspended. What Faraday then found is by completing the circuit, he caused the wire hanging into the conductant to spin around the magnet. So, what is causing the wire to move in a circular motion? Well, the answer is both very simple, but also very complicated. Essentially, the electrons flowing through the wire into the water is creating an electric current, and this electric current is pushing up to the magnet. The magnet has its own magnetic field, and that magnetic field is pushing into the wire and the water. So, we have an electric current and a magnetic field moving towards each other, and causing an ultimate collision. Now, this collision is causing a new force to form, one that is traveling in a right angle to that of the wire's position. So now the wire has a force pushing in a right angle around the magnet. And this is how the circular motion is formed. And that, boys and girls, was some science.
My name is Ryan Weiss. Science.
It may not seem like much, but this was the very first electromagnetic motor that had ever been created. And its humble beginnings would create some of the most important technologies, and of course, some of our features that we used every day, such as the vibration features in our phones. Many of the utilities we find on spaceships utilize electromagnets. And of course, where would we be if it wasn't for this humble little fan? Who keeps unplugging these fans? Now, you'd think that with such a pivotal discovery as the homopolar motor, Michael Faraday's status would skyrocket to the top of the scientific community. Well, you're wrong. Hey, come on, get it, come on. You're ruining it, man, ruining it. Okay, good enough. Say your lines, say it, go.
Nice job on the homopolar motor, Faraday. But now I'm gonna have you go make some really good glass.
Bro, what the flip? Oh, sorry, man. Sorry, I think I might have been a little too much. Okay. You want a sandwich? I'm gonna go make you a sandwich, okay?
Yeah, I'll take a sandwich.
Jealousy and paranoia held Faraday back for many years. Unfortunately, David died. And Faraday was free to advance through the world of science. Now, how much did Faraday advance? Let's do some math.
Math.
So, what we're going to do is create a timeline that's going to mark all the achievements that Michael Faraday had and the ages that he didn't match. Your job is to think about the ages I'm going to tell to you and think, what achievements do I hope to achieve at these ages? Then, compare them to what Michael Faraday did in real life. Get ready to feel really inferior. So, at the age of 24, Michael Faraday gave his first lecture on science. At 29, he became the superintendent of the house and laboratory at the Royal Institute. At 32, he was elected into the Royal Society. At 33, he became the director of the laboratories at the Royal Institute. At the age of 41, he became a Fullerian professor of chemistry at the Royal Institute, a position which, by the way, he would hold for the rest of his life. And at 54, he was offered the role of president of the Royal Institute, which he turned down. Now, there's one age that's not mentioned up here, but is the most important of all the ages, and that is the age 34. Because at 34, Michael Faraday helped establish the Christmas lectures at the Royal Institute. This has been a long-standing tradition that started in 1825 and continues to this day. Every Christmas, one scientist is invited to come to the Royal Institute and give a long, three-phase lecture based on anything they study in. It has had such notorious and prestigious scientists such as David Attenborough, Carl Sagan, Richard Dawkins, Freddy Fission, And the most recent one, Saiful Islam, all have hosted at these lectures, filling the minds of many young kids throughout the years, and it's all thanks to Michael Faraday. Michael Faraday's contributions to science would continue to span for the next 40 years. Contributions such as gas liquefaction and refrigeration, the discovery of benzene, electromagnetic induction, the law of electrolysis, the Faraday cage, now that's a good one, and the magneto-optical theory. Now, Faraday did theorize that the Earth might be surrounded in a magnetic field, and while he was the first to think this way, it was James Clerk Maxwell who ultimately proved the theory to be true. Now, Faraday did live to see this theory proven. However, it would not be for long, for on August 25th, 1867, Faraday passed away into the cold clutches of the Grim Reaper, aimlessly wandering, leaving behind all who loved him and all who admired his work. No one would know how much they loved him, or to how long he'd be remembered, or to what extent. It only proves that the pauper's grave is only as fancy as the prince's. Nothing we achieve here means anything. When we die, we won't know what happens. This is it. This is all. And yet we waste it on things like public access television shows that are only given to us because our much cooler cousin lost his because he was too busy fighting crab people. That's all the time we have for today. Now, I want to thank you for watching, but if you are watching on May 15th, 2017, we have a special viewer today, Mrs. Friesen. Now, Mrs. Friesen, if you're watching, I want to let you know something. Now, I know that you're responsible for all the grading, you gotta be non-biased and all that, but I want to leave you a little bit of information. This is Mush Mush. He's a 6-month-year-old harp seal that I graciously adopted for $30. Now, if you decide that my project wasn't that great and I think it deserves a bad grade, now, that's just fine. But I want you to know that if that does come to that, I'm going to track Mush Mush down. And I'm gonna club that seal. Thanks for watching, and remember, science is everywhere!